What's going on, everybody? Kalupis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you 5 reasons why you should buy the BLU F92e 5G. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where we'll be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So my first reason why you should buy the BLU F92e 5G is the materials. Now, in general, I would say this phone has a pretty good design, despite being a little bit more on the generic side for more of an entry-level phone, having a slightly thicker bottom bezel and a water drop notch front-facing camera. On the sides at least, the bezels are decently thin, and it does look at least reasonably modern. In general, in the last few years, entry-level phones have pretty much looked the same. But yeah, overall, despite not being anything really unique per se, I do think the general look of it is pretty good. On the back, we have this nice matte material that doesn't really pick up too many fingerprints. And I do like these squared off edges. It just makes the phone look and feel pretty nice. Now, aside from the actual design, the materials are what really makes this phone stand out from other entry-level devices. In this price range, I want to say most entry-level devices like this are usually made entirely of a more cheap kind of plastic, some better than others. But with the BLU F92e 5G, this phone is actually not made entirely of plastic. The back, according to BLU's website, is made of a matte glass. Doesn't really feel like glass to me, but it doesn't feel like plastic either, so in general it does feel really nice and premium, which is definitely surprising considering I got this phone for like $149. And in addition to this, the sides are actually aluminum, which was definitely a nice surprise because you typically don't see this on phones like this. In fact, even with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE that I'm using to record this video, I feel like when it comes to the materials, the BLU F92e 5G actually feels a little bit more premium. Now, of course, most people are probably going to be using a case anyway, since after all, this phone does come with a case, so there's really not a reason not to use it. Unless it makes the phone too bulky for you, then I guess I understand, but still. Regardless, when you are using a case on this phone, you're not really going to notice the materials too much. But at the same time, I can definitely appreciate the build quality here. I mean, the buttons are really solid, and with cheaper phones, that tends to be a bit of an issue when it's made of a really cheap plastic. Sometimes the buttons get stuck or feel like they're going to fall apart, but with this phone, we're definitely not getting this at all. And it also does have a really nice amount of weight to it. So in general, if you are looking for a really affordable device, but you do also appreciate good build quality and nice materials, then in that case, you will be really happy with the BLU F92e 5G. My second reason to buy the BLU F92e 5G is the storage. Now with this phone, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and for a phone in this price range, this is definitely a lot of storage. Now when you get to the higher, maybe like $500 price range, you start to see phones that have 256GB. But again, keep in mind, this phone goes for around $149, and at this price, unless you're getting like a refurbished flagship phone, getting 128GB of storage is not easy. And at this point in 2023, with stuff like apps, the system, and just files in general getting larger and larger as time goes on, you can really never have too much storage. And sure, if you're someone who's not really doing a ton with your phone, and you're always offloading all your photos and videos and music and stuff like that onto a microSD card anyway, then you could probably get by with 64. But if you really don't want to ever have to worry about storage, or you're downloading lots of apps, games, stuff like that, the storage on this phone is definitely going to be really worth it for you. And keep in mind, price-wise, there are phones that go for the same full price, like the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 for example, that only have 32GB. So in general, if storage is really a priority for you, then for the money, I do think this phone is really one of the best options. My third reason why you should buy the BLU F92e 5G is the camera. Now with this phone, up front, we got a 13-megapixel selfie camera, then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50-megapixel main camera, a 2-megapixel macro camera, and a 0.3-megapixel depth sensing camera. So I will say, the depth sensing camera is kind of weird, but despite only being 0.3 megapixels, portrait mode still does work perfectly fine. And the other thing that's a little too bad about this camera setup is that there's no ultra-wide camera, because in this day and age, with ultra-wide cameras becoming so popular and widely used, I feel like every phone, especially a 5G phone like this that clearly wants to have a good camera setup, should have an ultra-wide camera. So that is a little too bad. But aside from this, I do think the camera on this phone is actually really good. With the 50-megapixel camera, you can definitely get some real nice photos. So if you are someone who maybe doesn't want to spend a ton of money on a higher-end phone, but you still like to get nice photos, if that's you, the BLU F92e 5G is going to be a great choice. Now to give you an idea of what it can do, here's some pictures taken with the main camera. And yeah, I definitely do think this camera is really good for what it is. And I feel like this really shows that if you want to get nice pictures, you honestly don't have to spend $1,000 on a super high-end phone for, I want to say, most situations out there, especially things people normally use smartphone cameras for. A phone like the BLU F92e 5G is going to get the job done just fine. So again, in general, if you are looking for an entry-level phone that's affordable, but also does have a really nice camera, then this phone is going to be a great choice. And another thing I do want to point out about the camera setup here is that with the BLU F92e 5G, for video, we are getting a max recording quality of 2K in the rear camera, and then 1080p like usual in the front. And while 2K 4K I feel like is not a game changer by any means. It still is something, so if you want to record in a slightly higher quality than 1080p and just have videos that look a bit nicer in general, then this phone will have a bit of an advantage over something like, say, a Samsung Galaxy A14 5G or A23 5G, and even some of the mid-range Motorola phones. Because while of course it's debatable whether or not the camera is actually better, having the option to record in a slightly higher resolution never hurts. My fourth reason why you should buy the BLU F92e 5G is, as the name suggests, it is a 5G phone. Now at this point in 2023, 5G phones are becoming more and more affordable, so in and of itself, finding a 5G phone in this general price range isn't really unheard of. But that being said, still, getting a quality 5G device that goes for under $200 factory unlocked is definitely impressive. Now with this phone, we are getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor, and while this is a pretty common processor, I want to say the vast majority of entry-level 5G phones in this exact price range do have pretty much the same processor. The performance we get with it is definitely good. So when you're using this phone for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, watching videos, maybe playing some games and stuff like that, you can definitely expect to get a nice smooth experience. For me so far, I've had no performance issues with this phone. So overall, if you are looking for a really affordable 5G device and you also want good performance too, then you're really not going to go wrong with this phone. And finally, my fifth reason why you should buy the BLU F92e 5G is the battery. Now with this phone, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10W fast charging, and yeah, on one hand, the fast charging isn't really the best, but compared to other phones in this price range, I feel like not very many phones are that better when it comes to charging anyway. Sure, you can get like a Samsung Galaxy A14 5G for example, that has 15W fast charging, but honestly, the difference between 10W and 15W isn't really huge. And in my experience, although this phone doesn't really charge up lightning fast or anything, the charging speeds are at least decent, so for the average user, you're probably not going to have any issues. That being said though, when it comes to the actual battery size, with a 5000 mAh battery, you can definitely expect some great battery life and longevity here. In my experience, the battery life is really good. I mean, I haven't charged this phone for a while and it's still at 82%, so overall, I would say from my experience, and just the fact that a 5000 mAh battery in the US is pretty much the largest battery you can get in a smartphone, if you are in a situation where you're not always around a charger, but you still need to use your phone all day, a phone like the BLU F92e 5G that has a really large battery is going to be a great choice. And then of course, as the battery degrades, which all batteries do, this phone is going to last quite a bit longer than a much smaller battery, so if you like to get one phone and keep it for a longer time without having to replace it, this phone will be great for that too. But those were 5 reasons why you should buy the BLU F92e 5G. Again, if you do end up wanting to learn more about it, definitely check out the description, where we'll be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalip's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.